Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. You are tuned into In Conversation with Thandiwe Muriu, who is joining us virtually now. But the reason she's joining us virtually now is because she will be presenting and speaking at Bild 2025. So I'd like to welcome her to the platform. How's it going?
Hey, Derek. Thank you. Very excited to be here and very excited to be speaking at Build.
We're excited to have you here and at Bild. Look, we said it in the copy. You are one of the most anticipated speakers this year because it's new, it's fresh. Your work is so bold and beautiful, and today is our chance to kind of set the table and get into your mind and see what is behind the creative genius. Where did you start? How did you get into this whole thing? And drum up some hype. I hope all of you out there, if you don't know about the Build Show, we're going to drop some details and a link for those of you to check out Thandiwe and many of the other speakers that will be joining her that day. But I want to get the conversation started. When did this whole photography thing begin for you? I know you're self-taught. We have the same, I'm self-taught as well. So whenever I see another self-taught artist out there making it, doing big things, there's always a piece of me that resonates with that. So how did this whole photography thing begin for you?
I think first thing is to say, I never thought I would be a photographer. I never thought I'd be an artist. I never thought I'd speak to a global audience. So my journey began when I was 14 years old. And my dad kind of walked into the house and, I only have sisters. And he declared, girls, in this grand voice, today I'm going to teach you how to use a DSLR. And so we're like, okay. He took us outside, took out this old camera and taught us how to use the settings and how to make pictures. And it was just instant chemistry for me. It was what I had been looking for, but I didn't know I needed. I come from a family that's very artistic, but I'm not very artistic myself. I mean, I can't draw, I can't really sing. And so I kind of thought I was always the child who was different. But when he put a camera in my hands, it all just came together. And suddenly all these ideas that I had in my head, I could actually create them with this tool.
Not really artistic is not how I would describe you. That's an interesting choice of words there. I think it's
I
just a
mean,
different kind of art. I think maybe you and I might have a similar thought process in there because I can't create something out of nothing. I don't consider myself an artist. And with photography, it's kind of like, okay, I can see it. I can like it's the difference between having style and recognizing someone that has nice style and be like, wow, you look great. But I could never do that.
exactly. Like if I wouldn't know what to do the blank canvas, but when I see a face or I see a textile or I see an object, I'm like, okay, I can begin to dream and create from there. And so I call myself, I don't know, a scientific artist. It's like there needs to be a
Were,
formulated process and
were you originally like,
research
were
and
you a
then
math science
create.
person? Did you think you were going to go into something more technical like that? Or what did you want to be when you grew up?
No, business. I actually have a business degree. I didn't think I'd ever use it. I initially really wanted to do something related to visual arts in university, but there just wasn't anything here. So in Kenya, when you said you wanted to be a photographer, everybody assumes you want to be a journalist. And the one thing I was really clear about on my journey was I do not want to be a journalist. I don't think I have the heart for it. I don't know how to photograph and not take those stories home. So I always was interested right from the get go in creating rather than recording. And so I thought maybe I could find something in line with that at school, in university, and there just was nothing. So I went and got a business degree because I figured it's general enough that I could use it anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same thinking, but I got an English degree, which is way less usable than a business degree. I wish I had your. That's where we split off, and our paths went separately. And you chose the route that is a little better to. I think business works out more than English, but even still, it's like I look at your work, and you're still conceptualizing, and you're still. I mean, the way you use these patterns and these textiles is super creative to me. And I couldn't even, I mean, for me, when I say like I can't pull something off of a blank canvas, like no, I'm the type that's like, all right, I'll just put a single light up and yeah, that's it. And then there's nothing behind it. The way you're conceptualizing all of this, there's that creative juice flowing somewhere up there that you might be a painter in your past life.
Maybe. I mean, I did work in commercial photography, and I think some of the tools there helped me develop my artistic vision. because you get a deck or you have to do a treatment and you have to say what kind of lighting you want to use, what kind of color grading you're thinking about, what kind of styling maybe you think you'd like to go into the shoot. And asking those questions, I think over time helped me refine the aesthetic of my work. So like I said, I was always interested in creating, not recording. But at the point I was beginning to branch away from commercial into creative photography, I asked myself the question, who am I? And it sounds like a simple question, but it's quite difficult to answer. And I came up with 3 answers to that question. I said, number one, I'm African, and that completely informs my worldview and how I process the information that I receive. Number 2, I'm a woman, and I come from a family of only women, and that really deeply influences how I see the world, my aesthetic preferences. And then number 3, and this was evident from the first time I picked up a camera, I like color. And so I knew whatever I do, it needs to be colorful. And with those 3 answers, then I began to refine what does my style look like. And I thought, okay, I want some way to present my Africanness. And I settled on using this fabric called the Ankara, or more commonly the wax textile. And it's generally a textile that is viewed across the continent as a symbol of Africanness. It's usually very colorful, very eccentric, and for me, it became the perfect medium to begin to leverage in my work. And then I'm a woman. And so I thought I really do want to speak into some of the issues that I've struggled with as a woman in the field of photography. Part of my journey was there was no women doing what I did at the time. And so it took me a while to figure it out, but I realized, wait, why am I the only woman doing advertising photography in Kenya? And that left me with very deep questions. Is there something wrong with me because I want to do this? Why don't I want to do something else? Because I knew I wanted to do photography. The problem was there's just nobody else really doing what I wanted to do. And it left me with deep, deep questions that I thought if I had a project that I was working on, I want to address these questions. I have a deep love for African proverbs. And there's one that says, a bird doesn't sing because it has answers. It sings because it has songs. And I don't know if creating this work has helped me come closer to answering some of those deep questions I had, but it's allowed me to have a community that I can ask questions with. And so I took this fabric, I took themes and topics that were close to my heart, and I dreamt up this project called Camo.
And now we're here.
And now we're here.
How long did it take to get to this point? You talked about finding yourself, and I think that it's a conversation that a lot of creatives in general have a lot of the time, because we're so deeply tied into who we are as people and who we are as creatives. It's almost like this, to use, the fabric analogy. It is you're interwoven. Your life as an artist and your life as a person in general is so deeply woven together. How many iterations did you go through, or how long did it take you to really find a place where you're like, this is what I feel is my calling, or this is work that feels like me?
I don't know if it was a moment. I think it was just a progressive journey. I began the work in 2015. I created 6 images, and then I didn't touch it again until 2019. And even as I created those initial 6, I enjoyed creating them. It was almost too easy, is what I struggled with. And maybe that was my commercial background. It needs to be complicated and layered. But these images were created almost as a form of release, creative release. It was a time when I was really struggling with falling out of love with photography. It's something I had always loved doing. It was something that was always a part of who I was from a very young age, but it just wasn't satisfying anymore. And so this project, in a way, was sort of my effort to begin to remember why I love photography so much. And maybe that's why it felt too easy, because I just did what I loved. But I did it and then didn't feel the need to touch it again for many, many years, when suddenly I just had this great desire to continue the project, which then I have now continued for many years after that. But I don't know if it was a moment where I was like, this is me. It was a journey, and the work has evolved over time. Initially, it was kind of using those 3 answers to create the work. But then it pulled me into a different journey, which was my love for textiles and realizing that textiles can be a medium that I could leverage in my photography to address the ideas of social change, the idea of redefining historical narratives. And that led me into doing research. And then that led to an evolution in the work where I included African proverbs with every image that I created. And so over time, it's grown. Now it feels like me, but I don't know if there's an exact moment where it was like, this is it.
Mhm. Do you ever feel limited by being attached to one type of work or one project? And I think when people know you for one thing, and it's like obviously when I see one of your images, there is no denying it, which I think is the greatest compliment to an artist, is people seeing your work and knowing right away undoubtedly who created it. Does that limit you in any way? Or are there, times where you're like, oh, I love this, or I want to create something like this, but it doesn't fit what people know me for? Do you ever struggle with that?
I do. But I think one of my responsibilities as a creative is to remain curious. And so even if I have this style that everybody recognizes, I do create other work. And many times it's not very good. Sometimes it's interesting, but I think it's my responsibility to keep exploring, experimenting, because who knows, there could be another evolution to my style that is, just beyond what I'm doing right now. And I can only discover it by trying new things. I think it's okay to try and experiment. And in small ways, it doesn't have to be huge changes. So maybe instead of using geometric prints, I might experiment with using something like floral prints. Or I could try using different palettes that I haven't used before in my work. And even those small steps over time could lead me to a completely different aesthetic that is recognizable, but just as strong.
Wow, I love that. And I love the word evolution. That is something that all creatives strive for. And I think we don't really have a choice in this say. Again, as we grow as people and as we grow as artists, we get exposed to more, and as we get more experienced, you do. It's like what you like and what you see in your own work kind of changes. Who you are as a person, you change. So you kind of, your work is a reflection of that. So I like that term of evolution. And you never know what the next iteration is going to be or what you're going to be like 5 years from now.
I mean, the work is me, and I change. The world around me changes, and so the work will change. I recently published a book, and it was interesting in the process of creating the book, seeing the work in chronological order, how much it's actually changed over time. I don't even think it's something I picked up on until I saw it laid out in that format, and realizing that the themes, the proverbs, the writing around the work, the choice of textiles, the choice of subjects, all have changed as my perspective on womanhood, on culture have evolved.
I think that's the coolest thing. And this is just me on having my soapbox moment. But the coolest thing as an artist is, regardless of how much acclaim your work gets, those little nuances that only you will see. We look at our work. Ultimately, a true artist is creating for themselves. They're creating to express what they feel, express what they see. And I think being able to see those little changes and these little progressions in your work that no one else will notice, it's such a cool thing. I mean, the most valuable thing ever is that no one can ever get up here and no one can ever see it from your eyes. And the artist realizing that is something that I think we've lost touch with as we get more into this. Hey, I'm creating for others, or I'm creating for brands, or I'm creating for followers, and this and that. But we really have that holy grail of what makes our art so valuable is the fact that only we really see our art the way it was initially intended.
It's interesting. As I transitioned away from only doing commercial projects to moving more into the fine art space, it was a scary transition. It was more difficult than I realized. And the biggest part I struggled with was nobody's going to tell me what to do. I was so used to receiving a brief and kind of having a direction that I'm heading in, and all I'm doing is applying my aesthetic and, my way of thinking to it. It was almost too much freedom when I made the transition. And what do you mean I'm in charge of the messaging? I can do anything I want. Um, and maybe it was just the idea that I don't have to create for anybody except myself. That I'm not thinking about the audience for the work. It really is just trying to be a true reflection of myself or the topic or the theme that I want to explore.
Can you talk a little bit about the choice of textiles that you use, the color combinations, and ultimately, how do you take stuff that's so busy and it doesn't get lost? Like the camo project. I love it's like camo is like camo's supposed to blend in and it does, but at the same time, it's like organized confusion where everything fits and it's all there and it's patterns, but it's not too busy. It doesn't make your brain go crazy. It's all harmonious.
I'm a maximalist, but I still believe there's something like too much. And so many times as I'm creating, because creating isn't a perfect process. You don't when you pick up your camera, you don't know 100% what you're going to get. There is maybe you can get to 80%, but there's a 20% there that is just art. Um, and so many times when I'm creating, it's a very slow, intentional process. I have kind of because I designed the clothing that the subjects wear. So I have picked the textile, I have designed the clothing, I have made the eyewear that goes into the images, and then taking the image is kind of the final step in the creation of the artwork. Um, but it's filled with experimentation. So I have a good idea of what I think I want to do, but it is okay to walk things back on set. And sometimes we assemble it on set and it's like, this is too much. And I begin to take things off one at a time until I feel like there's balance in the image. A lot of my work involves paying attention to scale and color. And that's partly how I balance these incredibly busy prints with, usually in contrasting colors because I love contrasting colors. But depending on the scale of the print, maybe I can get away with more if it's a smaller print. If it's a bigger print, kind of like the one behind me, maybe I need to tone down the other elements in the image. It's not a perfect science, but there's a lot of feeling that goes into
I was
it.
just
And
gonna say it's feel. It's like measuring based on feel. Like cooking without a recipe and just like, I think I need a little bit more of this.
like every creative, I kind of know when we've got it there. You kind of,
Hmm.
press the button, you're like, that's a one. Yeah.
And it's like you can't, you just know. You know when you know. I'm glad you went into the eyewear because I think particularly with the image behind you, that's one that jumped out. And I was going to ask you how you come up like, do you do everything? And you answered my question right there because something like that, it's the square shape that breaks it up, and then you have the circle that ties it back to the flower, and the flowers, and you have the inside of the petals of the flower, and it's just everything. I'm a big geometrics person. I love seeing shapes in the wild. I think that we are naturally drawn to shapes and lines and patterns for a reason. And such an interesting choice there that the square, it's so subtle, but it breaks up the monotony of the rest of the image and it draws you in to, hey, this isn't just a pattern. This is a portrait. This is a piece of art.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about my work is I want the subject to disappear, but not completely. And I want to leave visual cues so that you kind of know that this is where maybe the boundary of the subject's body is. But I don't want to give it away all at once. I want to keep your eye in constant motion, but give it a point of rest. All those sound like they contradict each other, but it's possible. And so, for example, in the image behind me, there is a point where you need visual rest, and it's a very strong print. And so I usually make the eyewear in my work a contrasting color, but here it just didn't feel right because there's so much going on with those flowers. You kind of needed to tone it down and give the eye a break. So by keeping the color of the eyewear maybe similar to the background, but changing the shape, I'll have this interesting aesthetic element, but it's not overwhelming to the viewer.
Interesting. It's like back to feeling. It's like you know what you want to accomplish. You can't tell. And I could imagine this has your handprints all over it. This isn't the kind of work that you can delegate or have a big team for the conceptualization because it's almost like, well, I don't know how to articulate what I want. I know what I want and I know how to get what I want, but I can't tell somebody else how to do it.
Exactly. So I work with a very small team. I do put together a mood board for everything that I do because, as a photographer, I need to be able to communicate with my team what I'm trying to achieve, even if it's not 100% refined. Um, but then on set, it involves allowing a lot of time for creation and allowing space for me to change my mind, which is something I had to learn. Like, just because I have this idea in my head doesn't mean I need to be willing to let it go if it's not working and kind of redirect where we're going. And experiment. It's important to experiment. So sometimes the way I visualize creating the image works immediately. But then my question becomes, is that the strongest possible image that I can create? Maybe we need to spend a bit more time experimenting and changing a few elements in the image to see if we could make it even more strong.
And where does it start for you with the conceptualization? Is it based on a print, on an idea? Is it based on a color combination?
It's based on a print. Everything begins with a print. So I am always looking for interesting textiles anywhere. Like if I see one and I'm driving in the middle of the road, I will stop to go look at it. But it begins with the fabric. And I think that's a very powerful thing. My work deals a lot around the idea of identity. And it's interesting that fabrics historically have been where Africa has written its history and recorded its identity and its struggle with identity. So even the wax fabric, for example, actually didn't originate in Africa, it originated in Indonesia. And it's a record of how we have reappropriated a cloth and made it our own. I work as well with another textile called the kanga, which is original to East Africa. And the interesting thing about the kanga is it records historical events. So for example, somewhere in the late 1800s, the yellow fever hit the region, and the sick were quarantined off the coast of Zanzibar, where the cloth originated, in a ship that belonged to the Red Cross. And so it had this big cross on it. And today, when you see a cross, which looks more like a plus sign on a kanga, it's a symbol of protection. And so this cloth, these textiles all have history wrapped in them. They have the story of how we've interacted with the world as Africans. It has connections to how we see ourselves, what we want to say about ourselves. And that is a starting point of my inspiration. Then from there, I design the clothing that the subjects wear. And this very much depends on the print that I'm working with. I think each print has a personality. Some are playful, some are a little timid, some are a little bit more relaxed, some are aggressive. And so I try and look at the print and say, what do you want to be? And design clothing that I think plays up the personality of the print. I'll then work with tailors to actually stitch the clothing that the subjects wear. And while they're doing that, I will design the eyewear that the subjects wear. And that's just the fun part. That's pure creativity. That involves looking at everyday objects and trying to reimagine them. So, how many ways can I reimagine a light bulb as a pair of glasses, for example? And then the final step in the process is I reference historical hairstyles, many times from the archives of African photographers. And I use them as an inspiration point for the hair in my images, usually making them a lot bigger and a little bit more eccentric. And then I come into the studio and create this image. And it's all a single image. It's not a composite or a collage.
I love that. And the selection of your subjects, is there anything that is particular to you, like a certain subject for a certain fabric or for a certain idea?
So when the project began, it was very much, like I said, my experience being a woman and with womanhood. And so I wanted to pick subjects who I felt addressed some of the issues that I had struggled with as a woman. So in my context, beauty looks one way. And usually, women here, for example, a beautiful woman here would be seen as somebody with very long hair, long, straight, glossy hair, which is amazing. But my hair stands up and it's curly and it is not glossy. And so I very much chose subjects who addressed that kind of feeling that I had, that my hair wasn't enough or that I wasn't enough. And so through the images, they're all addressing different beauty narratives that I have struggled with and generally all women struggle with. Maybe a good specific example is in one image, I selected a subject with a gap in her teeth. And in my ethnic group, if you have a gap between your teeth, it's a sign of extreme beauty. I come from a dowry culture. And so if you were marrying a girl who had a gap in her teeth, she would demand more dowry than, for example, somebody like me who doesn't have a gap in my teeth, because it's just seen as a sign of extreme beauty. Except in kind of our modern definition of beauty, a gap between your teeth is not something desirable, and many people close it using braces. And so I intentionally wanted to work with a subject who highlighted that beauty ideology that my culture found to be exceptional.
I think that's so beautiful. And it's such a good way for people to learn about other cultures because in this world now, we have all the information at our fingertips, but none of the, it's like, it's almost like too much. And there's too much out there where it's just like, you don't know where to go. And this is why I think it is so important and so wonderful that we live in a time where everybody can tell their own stories. Everybody can take what's up here and they can show it to the world through the internet, through cameras. Everybody has a camera on their phone, and it doesn't take much of anything to take your vision and show the world. And especially when it comes to letting people know about the true identity of culture and from the boots on the ground, from the people who are actually living it, grew up in it, rather than some commodified version of it that you're getting from God knows where on the internet. I think that's beautiful. Has it been easy to stay true to your roots? I know once when you go in commercial, it's like you start to get away from the personal and it becomes all like, well, we need this and we want this and this sells. Have you been able to stay a little more grounded in your own personal vision, being more on the fine art side and taking things under your own wings?
I think so. And I think part of that comes with also very carefully selecting what I want to create, and even how I want to create it. So, one of the things I do is I insist that if I'm creating work, it must be created in Kenya, which is where I'm from. And that is very much because there was this narrative that kept going around that just the idea that we can't create good things um, by ourselves. And I really wanted to speak into that. And so if I'm commissioned to create work, I say, that's great. You have to come to Kenya for us to do it. And it turns into this wonderful experience of cultural exchange on both sides with my team and with whoever's coming to the country. Um, but even in the work itself, I oftentimes will partner with organizations that are working around women's issues. Or, for example, I recently worked with the UN to do a campaign around FGM. And for me, that is something close to my heart. It's something that is a reality in the region that I come from. It's something that directly impacts the lives of women. And I would be glad to leverage my art to spread the message around that. In terms of the fine art world and what I create, one of the joys of being an artist is you are in charge of the narrative. And so I then can choose what I'm creating and why I'm creating it. And it's really important for me to create work that remains authentic to the whole reason why I began to do this, which was to speak about womanhood, identity, belonging, and celebrating culture. And so as much as possible, I try and infuse that into my work.
I love that. Is this more, do you see it as preservation of the culture, reimagining? Is it kind of just you're taking cultural ideas and identities and putting your own spin on it?
I call it modernizing history. I don't know
I love that.
yeah. Because it's the idea I realized as I went on this journey of studying the textile and researching into some of the materials that I use, that it's very easy to participate in a culture without understanding it. And I was guilty of that. So I kind of knew all our traditions and our ways of doing things, but I didn't understand the why, or the nuances of why we did what we did. And it left me feeling very much the need to make history come alive, but in a way that we can consume it today. So here's a good example. Every piece that I create has an African proverb attached to it. Um, I don't think I know anybody who would kind of want to go to a library and borrow a book on African proverbs. That's just not how we consume information today. But by interacting with my work, they will get to know about this archive of African proverbs. Um, and so it's things like that. It's the work offers an opportunity to talk about cultural practices that maybe people have heard of but don't fully understand. I come from an indirect culture, and so there's many things that we don't speak about very clearly. And the work creates opportunity to kind of clarify and provides a platform for dialogue around some of those things that we know but we don't speak about very easily.
I love that. And how has it been received? Like when you first started doing this, was it something that people were initially on board with? Did they understand it? Did they see where you're going? I mean, again, you said it's a culture where it's like, why would you want to be a photographer? Or a photographer is going to be a journalist. How now that you've kind of cemented your vision, your legacy, and put yourself up on a platform where now you have people that will look to you. I mean, I can only imagine young African girls looking up to you, girls in Kenya who are going to say, "Wow, I can do anything, and I can take an idea that I have in my head, and I can tell beautiful stories through this little piece of gear."
Many African proverbs come to mind, but there's one that says, um, with a seed of imagination, you can plant a field of hope. And I think that's what my work has allowed to happen. That, I'm enjoying the journey of creating and storytelling. I'm a storyteller at heart. Um, but even in the middle of that, I am creating the idea that maybe history is important and interesting. History can be a platform for our inspiration. It's possible to be a photographer. That's a big one in where I come from. Like, it is actually possible to be a photographer or creative. You can do this. Or even the idea that it's okay to talk about some things that are difficult to put into words. Um, yeah. So the work's been received well. It maybe with a little bit of confusion at first, because it's, why do you want to make people blend into the background? But as there's been chances to tell the story, as there's been opportunities to explain the research behind the work, then it's been able to have impact, both in my community and outside of it.
Yeah, that's the big one right there is when you put your work out there as an artist, especially the bigger you get and the more far reaching your work goes, especially something conceptual and something that could be considered ambiguous. And people would be like, well, then they start doing their own work up here. And 99% of the time, they're way off and they don't get it. So it's great to have these chances to speak with the artists and really see where the work came from and what is the thought process behind it. Because again, yes, like you said, having the subject blend in, but not fully. And just that description you gave earlier of you want them to be there and see that they are separate, but it takes you a while to get there. It's like you appreciate the piece, your eye goes and dances around the work, and it ultimately settles on a subject camouflaged to steal from your project that kind of theme of camouflage. It's as much standing out as it's blending in, which I think is an interesting dichotomy.
But that's very much based on my own experience. I felt as a woman in my culture that I was invisible visible, if I could put it that way. That there was these expectations of what and who I should be. But if I was anything else beyond that, then I was invisible. So in my case, I wanted to be a photographer, which wasn't something that was very common among women. And the feeling that, I wasn't adding value to my community because I was going outside of what they prescribed for me, very much weighed heavily on me. And so, I felt a bit like the subjects in my work. I was invisible, but we all want to be seen. We all want to be recognized as individuals, not just as members of a group or a community. And so I really did want to speak into that.
And I think that's so great that that resonates across spectrums. That resonates with somebody who is not a woman from Africa. There are people that don't look like you, that don't share the same, for lack of a better word, categories as you, and they wouldn't check the same boxes, but they can still be inspired by that and say, you know what? Yeah, I too have felt like I'm just blending in, and you want to be seen for who you are. You want to stand out, but not in the way like, I don't need lights on me. I don't need, no, don't look over here. But I do want to feel seen and heard while still staying in my lane. Don't put attention on me. I'm good over here. I just want to, you know,
It's the questions I'm asking. So the aesthetics are very much influenced by my background and where I live. But the questions I'm asking are universal questions. They're questions on womanhood. They're questions anyone could ask about themselves. They're questions on belonging and identity. and that's what people connect with. Then the aesthetics is very, very much just informed by, my love of color, my love of this African fabric, and the objects that I see in my daily life, because that's where I find inspiration for the eyewear. It's things that you could find in any home in Kenya. It could be light bulbs, brushes. I mean, I've used safety pins. Anything I could think of can become an accessory. But taking those and then using them to speak into these universal questions.
Yeah, it's like the aesthetics are the vehicle to get everything that you're trying to say across in it's obviously we respond to the aesthetics. We're like, wow, this is a beautiful image. And some people will just appreciate the beauty of the image. But then there are people like me who are, they want to know more and they want to say, okay, beautiful image. But what does it mean? What does it mean to you? Why was it created? Why was it created in such a way? What is it saying to me? And I think that's what I love about it is art is such an easy way to educate because it's not boring text. Like you said, nobody's going to sit there and read through a book of African proverbs, but if I bring them in with beautiful imagery and I teach them the principle of the proverb rather than trying to just recite the proverb to them, they are going to respond to it. And so it's just a more creative way of disseminating these thoughts and information.
I mean, that's the power of images, I think. Sometimes they do say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I think sometimes images can go where words can't. They can definitely go where people can't. And so my work can go into contexts and spaces where I can't go, and it can have impact there. And sometimes the fact that it is colorful and joyful and non-threatening allows it to have more impact because then it's more approachable and we can speak about difficult things more easily. And it one of the things I feel we do as creatives is I don't know if I need to have all the answers. I just need to create an opportunity for dialogue. And my work is done if I've done that. As long as people are talking, questioning, comparing experiences as a result of looking at my work, then my work is done.
I love that. See, we are so aligned. I always say to people like dialogue, you can't get anywhere without dialogue. We can disagree, but if we don't have dialogue, we don't have anything. We don't have a path to getting beyond a disagreement or to really understanding. And I think understanding is one of the building blocks of coming together. It's one of the building blocks of progressing as people and as community. And I think that's why communities are so strong because there's dialogue, there's communication, there's working together. So I'm going to, as much as this pains me, I feel like if I keep talking to you, I'm going to ruin your entire build present. I'm going to ask them, there's going to be nothing left for them. So this has been such a good conversation. This is one of my hardest interviews because I'm like, man, I don't want to leave anything on the table. I could keep talking to you for hours. The dialogue is there. I want to give you the platform. Anything that you want to say in preparation of your presentation coming up at Bild? Is there anything you're working on or anything you want to drop on people what they can look forward to seeing and hearing when they come out and see you speak?
Well, I'll give a hint. So, like I said, I love textiles, and I will be coming with a lot of textiles. So it's going to be a very colorful presentation.
Love it.
But I really can't wait to just explore. I mean, tell you more about my work and my journey, but really just explore and share how much impact photography has had on my life, on my community, and how much it has created an opportunity for dialogue, global dialogue. And maybe saying the biggest lesson from my journey and this journey has been the moment I stopped trying to copy other people's work and I began creating from my own story is when the breakthrough to my work came. And I hope to be able to share that with you so that you can find a big breakthrough for your own work.
I love that. A message of authenticity. Be yourself. Don't chase somebody else's vision or dream. Find your own. And sometimes it takes time, but look, you made it. You've arrived. You're going to be so close to the garment district in New York. You might want to bring an extra suitcase. You might,
I
you might,
always do.
you might have a New York textile project coming up. We might have to keep you here for a couple of weeks and work on that. Thandiwe, this is great speaking with you. We are going to drop Thandiwe's website so you guys can check that out. Please, if you are in the tri-state area, you do not want to miss this. I'm going to make my way down there and make sure that I'm not giving work during that time so I can come check this out as well. We will definitely link up when you get here in New York. I want to thank you again. Any final closing words?
I think I'm good.
There we go. No more dialogue.
Like, well, but thank you for having me, and it's been a delight talking to you, and I really look forward to the Bill conference.
Pleasure having you on our platform, and it is going to be an even greater pleasure to have you in person at the Build conference. To all of our viewers and listeners out there, thank you all for tuning in. Another edition of the B&H Event Space now in the books. Catch y'all next time.